Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you how I use whip stitch to sew 4 honeycombs together into a finished block like this. So in a previous video I covered how I do the focus cutting on this, on the basting, so that this bit's all done. The tools I'm going to use for this are thread snippers. I use Clover wonder clips. I use milliner needles, and I use a size 11. Again, this is down to personal preference, so I know that I prefer a longer needle and one that's very, very skinny, but if you prefer to use a different size, then absolutely use what's right for you. And then I'm using a red Gutermann thread, and I wanted to talk about thread colour. So I would recommend, when sewing your block together, you want to choose a colour that will match whatever colour the fabric is at that centre point on the join, because if your stitches are visible, that's where it's going to be most noticeable. And it's absolutely fine to have visible stitches, because I think that's what makes it handmade. So when it comes to cutting the thread, I'm going to use this Gutermann polyester sew-all thread. I personally find it's a lot stronger and withstands the pulling. So hold it in my thumb and finger, and I'm going to go no longer than up to my elbow. I use my thread snippers and just take a snip, and then I'm going to tie some knots in it. So for tying the knot, I loop it round my fingers. I then pass that end of the thread through the loop and pull. Now I tend to do this, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, so the knot is on top of each other. You can sort of see it growing there, just because I know that I pull my thread really, really tightly, and then if I don't do a big enough knot, it'll pull through. So I've got 3 there. So coming to threading up the needle, when it comes to threading the needle, you want to make sure that this end of your thread is really, really crisp. So I would recommend just giving it a little snip just to make sure that it's nice and sharp. And then I'm going to get my needle, and then I'm going to hold this end of the thread right in between my thumb and finger, and then I'm going to place the needle down on top of the thread. So I'm not taking the thread to the needle, I'm taking the needle to the thread. And then I'm going to pull that through so that the tail is like that. So you can sort of see the tail's going a little bit of the way down, and then my knot is here at the end. So for sewing these together, you have got 4 shapes that are going to sit like this and like this. So we're going to sew them together in pairs. So I would take these 2 first, and they're going to sit like this, and you put them right sides together. Now this is the edge that we're going to sew along here, so I'm going to put my clip and I'm going to hold it there so that those corners are meeting, and then using my needle and thread, I'm going to start not right on the edge, because to me that's quite a vulnerable part when you open your block up. So I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch in, and I'm going through, let me see if I can zoom in, I'm going through the very edges of the fabric here. So I'm not going through the paper piece, I'm just going through, say, 1 or 2 strands, fibres of the fabric on either side, and I then pull it all the way through until my knot stops it. I'm going to do a second stitch in exactly the same place, and this sort of acts as like an anchor stitch, and if I pull it, you can sort of see it's holding it in. And now I'm going to go back to this edge here, and I'm pushing the needle away from me because I find that easier to do. I know some people like to sew towards them. Again, it's personal preference and finding what works for you. Let me see if I can zoom this in even more. Sort of have a play and see kind of how you prefer to stitch and what works for you. So I'm going to do that same anchoring stitch that I did here. So I've started here, I've taken the needle through and done an anchor stitch. Now I'm coming here and doing an anchor stitch. So this is called whip stitch, and that's because you're going through the 2 fibres and then you are whipping it over the top and then coming back. And you're going to keep whipping this stitch all the way until you get to this point here. So you can see I'm just continuing to go through the 2 fibres on each thing. I've actually just sewn a bit of my hair in as well, sorry, keeping it real. So I'm just going through the edges of the fibres, and I'm sort of doing a stitch maybe, so you can see here that my needle's really struggling to go through, so I know then that I'm almost going through the paper. So if you're struggling to pass your needle through, take it back out and sort of just readjust, so you're just taking the very edge of the fabric. And at this point I'm probably going to take the clip off because I'm getting really close to this edge now, so I sort of don't need it here. So I'm going to go right up to this edge, and then I'm going to do that same anchoring stitch that I did at the other end. And again, you can sort of feel when there's a pushback if you're struggling to get your needle through. So I've gone right up to that edge now. I'm then going to take another stitch through as to sort of anchor that edge into place. And in the same way that I didn't start with a knot there, I'm not going to finish with the knot here either. So I've done the anchor stitch, and now I'm going to go back 1/4 of an inch and take a stitch here instead. And then I'll do the anchoring stitch. But before I pull it all the way through, you see this loop here? I'm going to pass my needle underneath and into that into that loop, sorry. And again, I'm going to do it a second time. So I've essentially passed it through that loop twice, and this is what's going to create the knot. And if you run your finger over it, you can feel, if I turn it there as well, you can sort of see that's where my finish knot is, and then this is where my starting knot was. So that's nice and secure. I don't have the knots at the weak points of it, and then when stitched together it'll look something like this. So then you go ahead and repeat it on the other two, and then when your other two are stitched together they will look something like this. So then you have 2 pairs of honeycombs that are stitched together, which then means that we need to join the pairs together like this. So in the same way that we put right sides together and stitched along this edge, for joining these we're going to put them right sides together. You can sort of move any excess threads that might be getting in the way, and I know that this is the edge I'm going to sew towards. Now I'm sewing left to right because that's the direction that I write in, so it makes it easier for me to stitch in that way. If you want to sew right to left, then that's absolutely fine. I want these center points to meet as well, so I'm just gonna sort of nudge them into place here, and then I'm going to put a clip there because that's where I want that center point to meet. And then I'm going to focus on this edge here. So I'm going to sew left to right, and I've already got my thread in the same colour that will match that middle point of the fabric. I've put, where's it gone? I've put the knot at the end, so 3 knots one on top of the other, and I've threaded my needle up, and I'm going to go through. So again, I'm starting about 1/4 of an inch in, and I'm just going to go through the 2 edges of the fabric, making sure I'm not going through the paper template, and this knot has stopped it going any further. And then I'm going to take the anchor stitch again through the 2 fibres. And now I'm going to go back to this point, and you can almost see here how they aren't sitting flush with each other, but that's absolutely fine. I'm going to use my stitching to sort of make sure that they align with each other. So to do that, I'm going to come in ever so slightly at an angle actually, and going through here. So I'm almost sort of creating this join. So I'm actually going to do it one more time just to sort of anchor that stitch here where I want it to be. And now I'm going to concentrate on stitching across. So I'm going to keep taking my stitches. I sort of tend to do around about 12 stitches per inch, and that's if I had to count. I really don't normally count. I'm sort of just doing it by feel, I guess. I think it comes down to personal preference and sort of you get used to the way that you prefer to stitch. So I'm just going through the two edges here. If that fold is getting in your way, just nudge it out of the way like that as you're sewing it together. So I'm going to keep taking a stitch, so around about a 1/12 of an inch, but I'm not going to be too precise with it. Again, if you feel it pushing back, just take another go at doing it. So I'm getting quite close here now, and the clip's almost going to be in the way, so I'm going to take that off, and I'm going to keep sewing towards that centre point. So when I get up to this centre point, I'm going to go as close as I can, bearing in mind you are going through multiple layers of fabric now because you're right on the fold. So I'm going right up and joining these two together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the diagonal. So I'm going to join this one to its opposite counterpart on the diagonal. So I've gone through from this edge, and then I'm going through to the opposite, the diagonally opposite. Is that a term? I don't know if I've just made that up. And I'm going to do a second one as an anchor stitch here. Now the reason I'm doing this is to kind of close up any gap that might occur between these shapes. So, sorry, I don't know why my camera keeps changing the focus on it. So I've joined these two together, I've gone right up to this centre point, and now I've gone on the diagonal to join this one to its opposite. So for joining these two, I'm going to join these two together by doing 2 stitches. And then I'm going to do the same diagonal, so I'm going to join this one here to the one diagonally opposite. So I'm going to go through the very edge of this one. I think it's because I'm trying to look through the phone screen to see where it is I'm stitching rather than... Turns out that doesn't work very well. So I'm going through here. So I've sort of bypassed, because you can see there's a fold here. So I don't want to be going through that fold because that will be really, really tough on your fingers, and is more likely to sort of bend the needle, that be difficult to stitch. So I'm going to hold that fabric out of the way, and I'm going to go through the very edge here and then go through its diagonal counterpart. There we go. So you can sort of see there that I've gone through diagonally. And I'm sort of just gently pushing it through here now, because I know there are multiple folds here, just to stop that thread being caught up. And then I'm going to go back to, once I've finished doing the diagonal stuff, I'm going to go back to stitching these two together. It won't be as tough for you to get your needle through. It is mainly because I'm doing it through a screen, so I'm probably not seeing it as clearly as I would normally. So you can sort of see I'm literally just piercing the top of the fabric, and I'm going to work all the way up to this other binding clip. And again, I wouldn't worry too much if they're not completely flush, because you can sort of just nudge it into place for your stitching. So when you get right up to the end, I'm going to do 2 small anchoring stitches, just so that corner's nice and crisp, and then I'm taking it back 1/4 of an inch, and this is where I'll finish off and do my knot. So I've done 1 stitch, do the second stitch, and before I pull that loop all the way through, I'm just going to pass my needle through that loop once, twice, and pull it, and you should be able to feel the knot. You can just about see it there, and then you can snip it. And then if I move these bits out of the way, when it's done and all open, you can see here that there is no light coming through there. So that is how you would sew up the centre point of your shapes. And then when it comes to joining them, you can get little squares to go in between the two. So because I'm using 3/4 of an inch honeycombs, I would go for 3/4 of an inch square and join them like that with a square in the middle. Or you could do half square triangles and sort of square the whole thing off, or you could just join them so they would alternate like that. So you'd have, and then you could put squares in between to have a play and just see what works for you.